Hiroshi and the Scar of Regret. The Grip of the Past. In the serene world of Zen, suffering often doesn't stem from present circumstances, but from our tight grasp on what has already passed. The journey of letting go begins with recognizing the true burden of memory and regret. This story belongs to Hiroshi, a seasoned tea trader in a coastal town. For 20 years, Hiroshi had meticulously built his business, but his success was forever shadowed by a single, catastrophic event, a typhoon that destroyed his first and most beloved warehouse. Hiroshi was consumed by the memory of the storm. He wasn't just grieving the loss, he was perpetually replaying the sequence of events, convinced that if he had done one thing differently, moved the cargo, installed stronger doors, he would have prevented the disaster. This internal rehashing created a state of perpetual internal storm. Hiroshi was stuck in the past, struggling not with the loss itself, but with the regret of what could have been. His soul was carrying the weight of a moment that no longer existed. The Zen Master and the Thorn. In his despair, Hiroshi sought counsel from the Zen master Soyen. Hiroshi lamented, "Master, the storm was years ago, but I carry the sound of the wind and the sight of the wreckage in my heart every day. How do I forget the past? How do I make the pain disappear?" Soyen took Hiroshi's hand and pointed to a small, sharp thorn deeply embedded in the flesh near his palm. "Hiroshi," Soyen asked, "what is this pain?" "It is a thorn, master. It pricks me every time I close my hand." "And what do you do to stop the pain?" "I must remove it," Hiroshi said. Soyen nodded. "The memory of the typhoon is the first thorn. It was the original pain, the loss. But the true suffering you endure now is the second thorn, the memory of the memory, the regret, the self-blame, the constant reopening of the wound. You are not fighting the storm, you are fighting the ghost of the storm." The teaching of the two thorns. The first thorn, the event or pain, the unavoidable fact of loss as a thought, a sensation, without adding the emotional charge of regret or judgment. He learned that letting go is not an action of doing, but an act of cessation, the cessation of resistance and the cessation of the internal argument. The second thorn was withdrawn. The scar remained, but the constant, agonizing pain was gone. Hiroshi was finally free from a past that no longer existed. The empty teacup and the peril of trying too hard. The new trap, clinging to the practice. After realizing the simple truth of the two thorns, Hiroshi found a profound sense of peace. The mental noise had quieted, and the chaotic grip of the past had dissolved. However, a more subtle trap awaited. As is common on the spiritual path, Hiroshi began to cling to his newfound stillness. He feared losing the peace he had gained, and started approaching every moment with an intense spiritual effort. He meditated, but worried about whether his mind was still enough. He practiced mindfulness, but strained to be perfectly present. He had stopped clinging to the storm, but now he was clinging to the absence of the storm. He sought out Master Soyen once more, his brow furrowed with a fresh anxiety. "Master," he confessed, "I am peaceful, but I am terrified. How do I maintain this state? How do I ensure I keep letting go? I feel like I must constantly do something to hold on to this peace." The tale of the full teacup. Soyen, instead of answering immediately, poured tea. He filled Hiroshi's cup to the brim, and then, without stopping, continued to pour until the dark, hot liquid spilled over the edge, flooding the small table. Hiroshi jumped back, startled. "Master, what are you doing? The cup is full. Nothing more can fit inside." Soyen stopped pouring, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Just so, Hiroshi," the master said. Your mind is currently full, not of the old storm, but of the new effort. The effort to be peaceful, the effort to let go, the effort to be the perfect student. You cannot pour more into an already full cup. You must first empty what is already there. If you constantly try to do the letting go, you are simply adding one more layer of effort, one more form of clinging.
Has spilled. Now what do?
I simply wait for the cup to be emptied and wipe the table, Hiroshi replied.
No, Soyen corrected gently. You simply allow the cup to be empty. You allow the table to dry. No striving, no fighting, no anxiety about the next moment. The true spirit of Zen is not about doing, but about being, without effort, without attachment, just presence. Hiroshi finally understood that his journey was about unlearning the habit of grasping, not replacing it with a new habit of forced spiritual practice. He now knew how to simply be, allowing life and the emptiness of his cup to unfold naturally. The ego of perfection and the gatekeeper, the pursuit trap. After his encounter with Master Soyen, Hiroshi regained his equilibrium. He was no longer battling the past. He simply recognized that the storm was over. However, a more refined form of clinging began to surface. It was not clinging to materials or memories, but clinging to the perfect image of himself and the desire to control his peace. Hiroshi began trying to become the perfect Zen practitioner. He meditated every morning, but worried if his posture was right, if his mind was quiet enough. He read scriptures, but felt tense about whether he had truly understood the philosophy of letting go. He returned to Master Soyen, burdened by a new anxiety. Master, I stopped clinging to the storm, but now I cling to the stillness. I am afraid when my mind stirs. I fear I will lose this peace if I don't do everything perfectly. Soyen smiled and pointed to a small path next to the temple. Hiroshi, the master said, this road leads to the dense forest, where there is an old village. Go there and find an old gatekeeper. The story of the gatekeeper and the guest of emptiness. Hiroshi traveled to the village and found an elderly gatekeeper sitting in a small hut, his hands folded over an old spear. Sir, Hiroshi asked, how long have you worked here? Ah, over 50 years since I was a young man, the old gatekeeper replied, his voice deep. Then you must have mastered the best control so that no one can infiltrate the village, Hiroshi reasoned. Here, and when a guest arrives, be it a gust of wind, a sparrow, or a worrying thought, I simply open the gate wide and let it pass. If I try to lock the door, I am the one who gets trapped here. Recognizing the ego of control. The gatekeeper's words awakened Hiroshi. He realized he had built a mental gate around his newfound peace. He wanted to hold on to the perfect condition of stillness and tried to prevent unwelcome guests, stray thoughts, minor anxieties, or fleeting emotions. The Zen truth, clinging to, I must be perfect. This is the trap of the ego. The ego dislikes chaos, so it seeks to control the natural flow of life and mind. It says, if I achieve enlightenment, I must maintain it. I must be the perfectly still Zen person, never worried. The nature of awareness. The original text states, awareness doesn't require improvement. The awareness witnessing these words doesn't need to be fixed or perfected. It remains unchanged through success or failure, gain or loss. Letting go of trying. Letting go is not a one-time action. It is an attitude of allowing. It is allowing the mind to think, allowing the body to be tired, allowing emotions to change. If one tries to let go of trying, one is still trying. The freedom that needs no guard. Hiroshi found true letting go. It was not a state of eternal stillness, but the willingness to embrace all states without clinging to them. When he returned to Soyen, he said nothing. He just looked at his empty teacup, and this time, he was not worried about whether it was full or empty. He understood that if peace is a treasure, It needs no gatekeeper. Freedom does not need to be guarded, because its very nature is uncapturable. If he tried to hold on to it, he would be building a prison for his own soul. Kenjiro and the burden of knowledge, the transmission and the nature of wisdom. After Hiroshi found release from the obsession of the past and the illusion of control, our focus shifts to another subtle form of clinging to knowledge and the intellectual ego. Zen teaches that letting go applies not only to material possessions or negative emotions, but also to the things we cherish and pride ourselves on.
Heavy, that Kenjiro had to reinforce his floor to prevent it from collapsing. Whenever visitors came, Kenjiro spent long hours showing off his precious notebooks. He meticulously explained his process of synthesizing knowledge, the sleepless nights he spent distilling great thoughts. These notebooks were not just knowledge, they were his identity. He was Kenjiro, the scholar with the invaluable notebooks. But Kenjiro's life was extremely stressful. He spent every waking minute guarding, organizing, and adding to his collection. Fear of loss. He constantly feared fire, theft, or flood that might destroy his treasure trove of knowledge. The stalemate of accumulation. The more he wrote, the more he felt lacking. Every new notebook opened up 10 unsolved questions. He was lost in his own maze of wisdom. Lack of contemplation. He could quote every great Zen master, but he had no time to live according to those teachings. His mind was full of maps, but he never actually walked the path. He was the gatekeeper of the treasure, not the user of the treasure. Kenjiro, like Hiroshi, was imprisoned by his own accumulation. But instead of tea, it was information, the encounter with the nameless wanderer. One day, a nameless wanderer passed through the town and visited Kenjiro's house. Kenjiro excitedly showed the wanderer his notebook collection. After Kenjiro concluded his long, proud monologue, the wanderer just smiled and asked a simple question. Esteemed scholar, among all these notebooks, which one speaks of the nature of the breath right now? Kenjiro was stunned. It is scattered throughout many books, sir. In the books on yoga, Zen, and traditional medicine. I can point you to hundreds of excerpts. The wanderer gently interrupted. I am not asking about the descriptions. I am asking which notebook actually is the breath. Which notebook can inhale and exhale by itself? Kenjiro fell silent. He realized he had all the maps but had never truly tasted the flavor of the destination. The wanderer continued. Kenjiro, wisdom is not something to be collected, but something to be recognized. All these words, they are merely fingers. The direct insight into the nature of things, the wordless experience. It's like learning to swim. 1,000 pages on swimming are not worth one moment of letting yourself float in the water. Emptiness. Sunyata. Only when Kenjiro's mind was no longer filled with the notes of others, no longer worried about the organization of his intellectual self, could he become truly empty to receive the wisdom that was already available within him, the Buddha nature. Kenjiro did not burn his notebooks. He simply stopped obsessively adding to them. He began spending time looking up at the sky without needing to name the constellations, tasting his tea without analyzing its history. And when he did so, the notebooks that were once his burden became silent companions on the shelf, no longer the gatekeepers controlling his life. He had let go of the ego of knowledge to embrace the freedom of wisdom. Teo and the miracle of Wu Wei, non-doing. The burden of absolute control. In previous chapters, we saw Hiroshi imprisoned by the past and Kenjiro stuck in the accumulation of knowledge. Both shared a common root cause: trying to control a reality that is fundamentally uncontrollable. This story is about Teo, a young gardener obsessed with forcing and interference.
Teo was a talented gardener. His garden was always a model of perfection. But he lived in a state of constant anxiety and exhaustion. He did not trust nature. He believed that to have a perfect garden, he had to accelerate, control, and intervene in every process. When sowing seeds, he couldn't wait. He constantly dug up the soil to check if the seeds had sprouted. He measured water precisely to the milliliter, worrying about every minute of sunlight. If one plant seemed to grow slower than the others, he would over-fertilize it, or even gently pull the shoots to help it grow faster. Teo's excessive interference did not create growth. On the contrary, the plants he helped were often the weakest. They died from being checked too often, over-fertilized, or exhausted by Teo's own absolute effort. Teo's life was a reflection of his garden. He could never relax, always worrying about the future and trying to control every small element of his life, believing
You sow the seed, but you do not trust the seed. You do not trust the soil, and you do not trust the nature of life. How do you pull a shoot to make it grow, Teo? Ryokan asked. Sir, I gently take the top and pull up a little. And what happens? It will break, or it will be damaged. Teo lowered his head. Ryokan nodded. Your own development is the same. The letting go we speak of here is letting go of forcing. It is the discovery of the philosophy of Wu Wei, non-doing, action without effort. Delving into Wu Wei, action is not inaction. Wu Wei is not laziness or doing nothing. It is acting in harmony with the natural flow of things. It is the distinction between doing, necessary, appropriate action, like watering, fertilizing correctly, or weeding, forcing, excessive action, interfering with the natural process, like pulling the shoot, excessive worry, or trying to force oneself into a certain state. Wu Wei is action without clinging to the outcome, non-attachment to outcome. The gardener does, waters, and then lets go, waits for growth. Teo does, waters, but then clings, worries, checks, interferes, turning doing into forcing. Ryokan continued, In this garden, I only do what needs to be done, and then I let life do the rest. I am not the creator of life. I am merely the supporter of life. The seed inherently has the potential to sprout and grow. My task is to ensure the conditions, not to replace the process. Teo realized that his tension and fatigue came from his attempt to replace God or nature in his garden and in his life. He had turned life into a battle that must be won by will. Conclusion of Chapter 5, The Listening of the Water. Teo's lesson is a lesson of trust and surrender. When Teo returned home, he looked at the seeds in his hand. This time, he didn't see them as objects that needed to be rushed. He saw them as promises that needed to be honored. He sowed them, watered them, and then sat down next to the garden and simply observed. He learned to let go of the tension of having to control. He learned to listen to the garden, to the flow of energy. Precise, balanced, and strictly adhered to ancient rules. Her reputation was perfection, but that very perfection became Misaki's shackles. Every time she picked up the brush, Misaki no longer felt freedom or the joy of creation. She felt the weight of all eyes watching her, of every expectation. She no longer wrote for herself, but to defend her reputation of perfection. She fell into the trap of image attachment, fear of error. She feared a misplaced stroke, a drop of ink in the wrong spot, because it would damage the perfect reputation she had painstakingly built, forcing the spirit. When writing, she tried to force the chi, spirit, the essence of the work, to manifest exactly as she intended. This over-effort made her strokes rigid and soulless. Misaki had technique, but she lacked the aliveness and spontaneity that only comes from letting go. She had turned art into a test she could not fail. The encounter with the blind Zen master.
In her despair, Misaki sought out an old temple high in the mountains. There lived an old Zen master named Hoshin, who had been blind for a long time, but was known as the greatest art critic in the region. Misaki presented her latest work, a technically perfect piece of calligraphy, without a single flaw. The master did not look, but gently used his hand to feel the paper, sensing each stroke. "Misaki," Hoshin said, his voice calm, "this work is beautiful, but I do not feel joy when admiring it." Misaki was confused. "Master, why no joy? I practiced for months to make it perfect. It has no mistakes." "Misaki," the master explained, "you tried too hard to remove life from the work. You controlled everything to the point where your spirit vanished. Your stroke is not the stroke of a flowing river, but the stroke of winter ice. You write with technique and anxiety. You write with a closed mental gate, recalling Chapter 3, trying to prevent any imperfection. Your stroke becomes too heavy because it carries the weight of an entire reputation." Wabi-sabi, letting go of the ego's image. The master taught Misaki the philosophy of wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is an aesthetic
to happen, because that very imperfection is the unique personal mark, the living dynamic of the work. Letting go of forcing, allowing the spirit, chi, to flow freely through the brush. Misaki and the living stroke. Misaki returned and started a new work. This time, she did not try to make the stroke perfect. She simply allowed it to happen. Her new work had a small ink blot, a slightly deviated character compared to the rules. But when the blind master felt the work, he smiled and said, "Misaki, I can sense your breath in this stroke. This stroke is no longer rigid. It is dancing. This time, you let go of the Misaki you thought you had to be, so that the Misaki you truly are could emerge." When Misaki let go of the need for perfection, she reached a deeper beauty than mere technique. She found freedom in her art. Takahashi and the Thief of Lack, the illusionary search for wholeness. In earlier chapters, we learned that suffering comes from clinging to the past, knowledge, control, and self-image. However, all these forms of clinging stem from one of the deepest and most universal beliefs, the belief that we are not enough. The deepest letting go in Zen is letting go of the need to be better, fuller, or more perfect than we are right now. The original text emphasizes, awareness doesn't require improvement. It doesn't need to be fixed or achieved. This story is about Takahashi, a wealthy and successful man who spent his entire life searching for something that was missing. Takahashi had achieved everything society deemed successful: a happy family, a brilliant career, the respect of his community. But deep inside, he always felt a void. He believed he was a house missing a wall, an unfinished work of art. This belief propelled him. Relentless pursuit. He took every course, read every self-help book, practiced every form of meditation, not out of a desire to learn, but to fill the empty space. Resistance to reality. He could not accept that he was whole right now. He always lived with the thought, when I finish this project, when I achieve that level of enlightenment. That night, Takahashi decided he had to steal that treasure. He believed Kansho was hiding some ultimate truth or secret. He secretly crept into the temple. Kansho was sound asleep. Takahashi searched every corner, every box, under the mat, and behind the non-existent altar. He found nothing. As Takahashi was about to give up, Kansho woke up. He saw Takahashi trembling with guilt and frustration. Kansho smiled and said, "Takahashi, what are you looking for? This temple is fundamentally empty.
so there is nothing to steal. You are not the thief, but you are your own fear, trying to steal something that doesn't exist. Takahashi bowed his head. Master, I was searching for my wholeness. I thought it was a hidden treasure, and I needed to achieve it. Kansho placed a hand on Takahashi's shoulder. Takahashi, have you ever considered that the very lack you are trying to fill is the thief? That thief has stolen your peace by convincing you that you need something outside yourself to complete you. Letting go of the need for self-improvement. Takahashi's lesson is the release of the illusion of lack. In Zen, the concept of Buddha nature teaches that each of us is whole from the beginning. We do not need to become something. We only need to remove the layers of clinging, attachments, fears, searching, to recognize the wholeness that is already there. Inherent wholeness is the core of this letting go. Letting go of the seeker. Stop pursuing a better self in the future. The seeker is a role, an identity created by the ego to maintain the feeling of not enough. Letting go of the fix-it project. Recognize that you are not a broken machine that needs repair. The awareness witnessing these words is already perfect. Emptiness is fullness. Like the empty temple, emptiness is not the absence of something, but the readiness to contain everything. When you stop searching, you will find the fullness exactly where you are.
Conflict, and never expressed his true opinions or emotions. He always wore a social armor, made of excessive agreement, politeness, and a relentless effort to maintain a calm, perfect facade. He believed that if I don't show any crack, no one can hurt me. However, this armor turned him into a distant and lonely person. It prevented any pain from entering, but it also prevented love, true connection, and freedom from leaving. Yuki and the burden of the rope. Kao had a close friend named Yuki, a cheerful young monk. Yuki clearly saw the tension and rigidity in Kao's heart. One day, Yuki brought Kao a finely carved wooden box. Inside was a beautiful coiled rope, woven from shimmering silk threads. Kao, Yuki said, this is my gift to you. This rope is very strong. Take it with you. Kao was confused. Thank you, Yuki, but what is this rope for? It is for tying, Yuki replied. Whenever you feel anxious, use this rope to tie something precious tightly to yourself, so you feel safer. Kao followed Yuki's advice. He used the rope to tightly tie his wallet, then his house key, and then tied his wrist to his workbench. Soon the rope became an indispensable part of him. He felt secure when everything was tightly bound. But then, removing the rope became difficult. The rope began to constrict, causing pain and hindering all his movements. He couldn't work comfortably, couldn't sleep well, and couldn't open up to anyone because he constantly had to check if the knots were tight enough. Kao returned to Yuki, his hands swollen from the rope. Yuki, Kao lamented, this rope doesn't bring safety. It brings torture. I let go of the past. I let go of perfection, but I cannot let go of this fear. It binds me tightly. Yuki looked at the marks on Kao's hands. Kao, that rope is the armor you have been wearing. You use defense, control, and emotional suppression to tie yourself from harm. That armor was made from your own need, the need for safety, the need for acceptance. Trust in one's ability to cope with what comes, rather than trying to prevent it from the outset. Yuki concluded, letting go is not becoming naked with nothing to protect. Letting go is realizing that you don't need to hide your true nature because it is already whole. The final rope of letting go is the rope of compassion. Loosen that rope, Cow. Cow untied the tight rope, and for the first time, he felt his hands truly free. He realized that the only person who had been binding him all these years was not others, but the fear within himself. The eternal flow and the stillness of awareness, the rippled lake and the nature of mind. We have followed various individuals on the path to letting go. Hiroshi found freedom from the past. Kinjiro released the burden of knowledge. Teo learned harmony through Wu Wei. Misaki accepted the beauty of imperfection. Takahashi let go of the illusion of lack. And Kao removed the armor of fear. Every story points to the same truth. Suffering does not come from life, but from the mind's clinging to life. The human mind is like a deep lake. When Hiroshi stirred the mud of regret, the lake became clouded. When Kenjiro accumulated too many objects on the surface of the lake, it became congested. When Teo tried to force the lake to be still, it only rippled more. Master Soyen often taught, you cannot force the lake to be still. You can only stop throwing rocks into it. All the acts of letting go that the characters performed were not actions of doing, but actions of cessation, the cessation of resistance and the cessation of the internal argument. When this cessation occurs, the mind lake naturally settles, without effort or interference. This is Wu Wei, applied to the inner life. The ultimate truth. Awareness needs no improvement. The original text touches upon the climax of Zen teaching when speaking of awareness. This is the final letting go, the letting go of even the one who lets go. What is witnessing Hiroshi's sadness? What is aware of Misaki's tension? What is observing these words right now? That is awareness. Throughout our lives, we have identified ourselves with everything: emotions, thoughts, roles, successes, and failures. We think we are those stories. Achieve enlightenment, because awareness is watching that very act of achieving. The final teacup of letting go. Let's return to the image of Master Soyen's empty teacup. When Hiroshi let go of the storm, the cup was emptied. When Kenjiro let go of knowledge, the cup was ready to receive direct flavor. However, there is one last clinging remaining to the doctrine of letting go. If we cling to the idea of I must let go, it becomes a new form of effort and attachment. It is a third thorn, the thorn of self-improvement. Zen calls us to let go of the boat after crossing the river, to let go of the second thorn after removing the first, and finally, to let go of these very words. The stories, the philosophies, the advice. The purpose of the teaching is to point to the truth, not to become the truth. The highest letting go is resting in awareness. It is the allowance for everything to be as it is, without judgment, without interference. When this letting go is recognized, what remains is the simplicity, lightness, and truth that the original text concluded. When the grasping, the forcing, and the demanding that life be different fall away, what remains is peace, the peace that was always here. Let all these stories fall away from your mind and simply rest in the awareness that is witnessing them. The sky of mind and letting go of others, the mistake of fixing others. In the preceding chapters, letting go primarily focused on our relationship with ourselves, the past, and our ideas. However, one of the greatest sources of human suffering comes from clinging to what others should be or how relationships should unfold. Just as Teo tried to pull the shoots to make them grow faster, we often try to pull, push, or shape our loved ones to conform to our expectations. This story is about Aiko, a kind-hearted woman who believed her job was to fix the world around her. Aiko loved her husband, her children, and her friends,
but her love always came with a long appendix of conditions. She could not accept the natural chaos of life or the imperfections of those around her. She constantly tried to fix her husband's work habits. She constantly corrected how her children.
Butterfly you can find. Bring it back here, but make sure it is perfectly still and not fluttering. Aiko went into the garden, where hundreds of butterflies fluttered freely. She tried, she chased, she swung the net, but every time she caught one, the butterfly struggled violently in the net. When she tried to hold it tightly to make it stop struggling, she inadvertently crushed it. She returned with empty hands and tears in her eyes. Master, the harder I tried to capture them, the more they struggled. The harder I tried to keep them still, the more they were harmed. I cannot control their freedom. Roku nodded. Your loved ones are the same, Aiko. You love them, but you are using a net to force them to become a perfect image in your mind. You try to make them still, to make them without flaw. But that very effort damages the free nature of both them and you. The sky of mind. Roku explained that we are not the clouds, but the sky. Your mind, Aiko, is the sky. The people around you, their emotions and behaviors are like the clouds passing by. There are white clouds, dark clouds, storms, and sunshine. Clinging is trying to hold on to the white cloud and drive away the dark cloud. Letting go is realizing that you are the sky, and the sky does not need to do anything with the clouds. The sky is never harmed or changed by the clouds. It never says, "Oh no, I don't like that dark cloud, I must go fix it." The sky simply allows the clouds to come and go. Letting go in relationships is letting go of the right to be God. Stop believing you know what is best for others, and stop trying to control their journey. Letting go of judgment. Realize that the behavior of others is a reflection of their own pain and clinging, not something for you to fix. Letting go of reaction. Instead of reacting to the dark clouds of others with anxiety or anger, rest in the sky of awareness and simply witness. Aiko returned home, and instead of criticizing her husband's messiness, she took a deep breath and recognized that his messiness was his cloud, and her anxiety was her cloud. She let go of the need to react. Permanence, a miniature ancient tree that seemed indestructible. Masato became obsessively attached to his bonsai. He believed that through them, he had conquered time. He cared for them with extreme tension and anxiety, afraid to travel far, afraid to sleep deeply, for fear of any disruption. The lesson from the broken vase. One day, a visitor accidentally broke the antique ceramic vase Masato always used to water his plants. It was a vase he had used since he was an apprentice. Masato flew into a rage, shouting and grieving as if a part of his own body had been lost. Masato sought out an old monk named Kojima, known for his serenity when facing all forms of loss. Masato lamented, "Master, I cannot let go of perfection and permanence. I suffer from the impermanence of all things, my bonsai, my objects, my people. What must I do to hold on to what I cherish?" Kojima took out 2 cups, a new ceramic cup and a clear glass cup, and said, "Masato, have you heard the story of the cup? Do you know that this cup is already broken?" Masato was surprised. "Master, I see it is intact." Kojima smiled gently. "From the moment this cup was created, its nature has been breakage. Its existence is a borrowing of time.
This cup is not going to break, but it is already broken. It is only temporarily in a state of unbreakage. You have lived in the illusion that your vase, your bonsai, will forever exist in their current form. When it breaks, you not only suffer the loss of the vase, but you suffer the shattering of the illusion of permanence that you clung to. Letting go of clinging to the impermanent nature. Masato's lesson is learning how to love what must depart. Letting go here does not mean ceasing to care or appreciate. On the contrary, when Masato realized the vase was already broken, fundamentally, he cared for it with a deep of resistance to death. And through that, he lived a life more alive than ever before. The jewel and letting go of fixed belief. Throughout this journey, we have seen characters let go of various burdens. However, one of the hardest burdens to recognize is clinging to absolute certainty and constant doubt about the path one is on. Like Takahashi, searching for wholeness, many seek an ultimate truth or a perfect belief to cling to, believing that once they grasp it, all suffering will end. Doubt, on one hand, is a valuable tool for seeking truth, but on the other, it can become an attachment, an obstacle preventing us from truly living what we already know. This story is about Kano, a fervent seeker of truth. Kano spent his life reading every scripture, listening to every master, and practicing every discipline. He was always searching for a formula or a golden key to liberation. But the more he searched, the more he doubted. Have I chosen the right path? Is this teacher speaking the truth? Have I practiced well enough? Kano's doubt was not healthy curiosity, but a clinging to uncertainty. He could not let go of the need to know everything before he could take a single step. The story of the jewel and the fishing Zen master. Kano heard about a Zen master named Jozen, who lived as a hermit, fishing on a secluded lake. Kano arrived and asked Jozen, "Master, I have searched for the truth for 20 years, but my mind is always full of doubt and uncertainty. Please show me one precious jewel, one single, undeniable truth that I can cling to and cross the sea of suffering." Jozen said nothing. He handed Kano a small wooden box exquisitely carved. "This is the precious jewel you seek," Jozen said. "Keep it. Carry it with you, and it will bring you peace." Kano was overjoyed. He believed he had finally found the solution. He kept the box with him at all times, not daring to open it. The existence of the box brought him immediate peace, a release from the anxiety of searching. However, that joy gradually faded. Curiosity and doubt resurfaced more. Letting go of clinging to belief. Kano's lesson is the release of clinging to belief to achieve understanding. Belief is the acceptance of an idea, a formula, or a doctrine without direct experience. Understanding is the direct experience of reality. It is you seeing for yourself that the empty mind is inherently full. Zen does not demand blind belief. It demands direct experience. Let go of persistent doubt. Doubt becomes toxic when it becomes a habit, a tool to avoid action and avoid life. Let go of absolute certainty. Absolute certainty is an illusion. The only certainty is uncertainty. Letting go is living in harmony with this uncertainty, trusting the awareness that is witnessing it. Let go of the formula. Even Zen, or this doctrine of letting go, is just an empty box. Its purpose is not to contain something, but to direct your attention to the emptiness that is already present. Kano finally understood. The truth was already within him, and emptiness is not a lack, but completeness. When he let go of clinging to a fixed belief, he found true faith, faith in his own wholeness. He became the practitioner, no longer the seeker, skillful non-doing, and the burden of the goal. The difference between work and forcing. In modern society, work is often equated with stress, over-efforting, and absolute clinging to the result. We believe that to succeed we must push ourselves and push the work to its limits. Like Teo trying to pull the chutes, many people in their work try to extend working hours, force themselves to achieve unrealistic goals, and forget the joy of the process itself. This story is about Kazuya, a talented swordsman obsessed with the goal of absolute victory, perfect victory. Kazuya trained tirelessly in swordsmanship. He had perfect technique and extraordinary strength. However, in every match, he made a fundamental mistake. He yearned too much to end the match perfectly. He did not live in the moment of the present strike, but was already thinking about the glorious victory afterward. This clinging to the outcome made his body stiff and predictable. His energy was no longer a fluid flow.
Unable to cut it in half, Fuji smiled. You are trying to cut time in half. You are fighting the truth that the leaf falls according to its own law, not yours. Forget the leaf, forget the victory. Just merge with the moment. Fuji stood up, closing his eyes. A leaf fell. There was no calculation, no obvious effort. Fuji's branch only vibrated subtly, and the leaf, as it passed, was perfectly divided in two, without a sound. Wu Wei, skill and presence. Fuji explained his philosophy. This is not luck, but skillful non-doing, skillful action. The skill honed over thousands of hours of practice, making the body and mind act without conscious thought. Kazuya already had this. Non-doing. The letting go of clinging to the outcome. Victory. When these two factors combine, the person reaches the state of spontaneous action, or action without an actor. Before, Kazuya was the fighter trying to win. His mind was in the future. Now, Kazuya is the act of the strike unfolding by itself. His mind is in the present. Victory is not something you do, Fuji said. It is something that happens when you completely let go of the need to win. When you focus only on doing your best in the present moment, the result will naturally take care of itself. This is the greatest letting go in work. Letting go of clinging to the absolute goal. Letting go of the goal is not goalless. It is freeing the goal from the burden of self-validation. Shift focus. Instead of focusing on victory, future, focus on the quality of the strike, present. Merge with the flow. Allow the energy of the work to flow through you, without resisting it with tension or pressure. Free action. Action not dictated by the fear of failure or the craving for success. Kazuya learned to relax his body, relax his mind, and trust his skill. He became a much better swordsman, not because he tried harder, but because he stopped over-trying. He found joy in the very act of striking, and victory came to him as a she had created. The lesson from the uninvited guest. One day, a wandering Zen master named Hakuin visited Sora's house to seek lodging. Hakuin was rough-looking, sometimes acted strangely, and had a reputation for unconventionality. Sora, out of honor and hospitality, accepted him. However, she constantly worried that Hakuin might ruin her perfect image in the eyes of her neighbors. The next morning, as Hakuin departed, Sora discovered a large mud stain on her immaculate wooden floor. She felt intense shame and anger. The mud stain not only dirtied her floor,
but also tarnished her perfect image in the eyes of others. Sora sought out Hakuin and complained, "Master, I tried to maintain cleanliness and perfection, but you left the mud stain on my floor. It made me lose face." Hakuin smiled, pointing to a nearby swamp where lotus flowers bloomed beautifully. "Sora," Hakuin said, "do you see those lotus flowers? They are symbols of purity and absolute beauty. But where do they grow from?" "They grow from the mud, Master," Sora replied. "Exactly. If there is no mud, chaos, imperfection, mistakes, ugly sides, then the lotus flower, enlightenment, purity, beauty, cannot exist. You are trying to completely eliminate the mud from your life. You cling to cleanliness, the good, and resist filth, the bad. Letting go of dualistic judgment. Sora's lesson is about the unity of opposites in Zen. Zen teaches that good and bad are merely labels that the mind imposes. They are not the fixed nature of things. Let go of self-judgment. Sora must accept that she is also human, makes mistakes, has imperfect thoughts, and those muddy aspects are the raw material for her growth and compassion, the lotus flower, to blossom. Let go of social dependence. Her peace should not depend on the approval of her neighbors or the absence of judgment. Freedom is when you accept that you dare to have a mud stain on your floor and realize that your value is not diminished by it. All is relative. In the flow of impermanence, what is good today may be bad tomorrow, and to fear of loneliness, uselessness, and dependence. This story is about Akiyama, a successful retired man who struggled with emptiness and the loss of his role. Throughout his life as a senior manager, Akiyama was always respected and had a clear role. His value was measured by his busyness and his necessity to others. When he retired, his world shrank. He no longer had to make decisions, no longer had to control, and was no longer sought after by everyone. He began to feel deeply useless and lonely. He spent his days clinging to memories of past glory, constantly recounting old stories to anyone who would listen. He tried to fill this void by joining clubs, but he could not let go of his old role. He still tried to control meetings and direct everyone. As a result, he became difficult to approach and felt even lonelier. The lesson from the Master's Stone. Akiyama sought out an old Zen master named Seiwa, who lived alone in a small hut on the mountain, yet always radiated extraordinary peace and freedom. "Master," Akiyama lamented, "I feel abandoned and useless. I have lost my purpose. What must I do to regain value and connection in this new phase of life?" Seiwa said nothing. He handed Akiyama a small, smooth stone. "Akiyama," Seiwa said, "hold this stone tightly in your palm, and then tell me about it." Akiyama complied. He held the stone and began to describe. "It is cold, smooth, and has a few small cracks. I think it is an ordinary stone, without value." Seiwa smiled. "You are right. It is an ordinary stone. It has no reputation, no role, and needs no one's approval. It is itself, without needing to do anything to prove its value. Throughout your life, you clung to your role. You thought you were the manager, the decision maker, the necessary person. Now that those roles are gone, by the law of impermanence, you feel that you, too, are gone." Seiwa continued, "This stone does not try to become a diamond. It does not try to become a mountain. It is simply self-sufficient, not cling to anything to define it. The freedom of old age is discovering that you are always whole, even when you are alone with the stillness of awareness." Akiyama returned. He no longer recounted old stories. He began to listen more. He found joy in simple tasks, tending his small garden, brewing tea, and simply sitting still without needing to do anything. He let go of the burden of the necessary person and found serenity in just being himself. The second arrow and the release of physical suffering. Resistance to pain. In life, we must face not only mental losses, but also the weakness and pain of the body. When illness or old age arrives, the natural human reaction is to resist it fiercely. In Buddhist teaching, pain is like the first arrow shot at us, a physical event, unavoidable. But suffering is the second arrow, our mental reaction to the initial pain. Suffering comes from us saying, "Why me? This shouldn't be happening, and I must escape it." This story is about Haru, an old bonsai artist who endured chronic, prolonged pain from an illness. Haru could no longer garden as before. The constant pain in his back and knees took away his favorite work and his freedom of movement. Haru struggled fiercely with this pain. He fought it by taking medicine, seeking new treatments, and more importantly, by hating his body. Every time the pain came, Haru's mind screamed, "This body is betraying me. I don't want this pain. My life is ruined by it." This very resistance and hatred created a layer of mental suffering much thicker than the initial physical pain. The lesson from the guest of the hill. Haru sought out Zen master Jinin, a teacher known for his ability to live calmly with various illnesses. Haru lamented, "Master, I cannot let go of the pain. It is a physical reality. How can I let go of something that has invaded my entire being?" Jinin invited Haru to sit on a stone step, facing a lush green hill. "Haru," Jinin said, "imagine your pain is an uninvited guest who has come to your house and decided to stay. What have you done with that guest all this time?" I locked the door, shouted at him to leave, and resisted.
Practicing acceptance. Letting go of chronic pain is not indifference, but a change in the relationship with it. It is the act of accepting the physical pain without adding the layer of mental suffering to it. Invite the pain in. When the pain comes, instead of recoiling and resisting, Haru learned to open up and say, "Hello, pain, you are here again." He used awareness to observe the pain as a pure phenomenon, sensation of heat, tension, throbbing, without labeling it as bad or hateful. Separate the self. Haru let go of the identification, "I am the one in pain." Instead, he realized the body is experiencing pain and awareness is witnessing it. Awareness, the witness, is unharmed. Action of compassion. Instead of hating the body, Haru began to treat it with compassion, like a mother caring for a sick child. This compassion softened the resistance and reduced the tension. Jinin concluded, "You cannot control the arrival of that guest, but you can let go of the act of resisting his presence. When you let go of the second arrow, you still have the pain, but you have found peace right in the midst of chaos." Haru returned to his garden. He no longer fought his body. He sat down, felt the pain, and accepted it. The pain did not disappear, but the torment vanished. He learned to garden slowly, gently, with respect for his body's limits. He found freedom not from the absence of pain, but from letting go of the demand for pain to be gone. The inverted hourglass and clinging to time. The prison of waiting. Clinging to time is one of the most common and least recognized forms of suffering. We live in a state of constant waiting, waiting for the weekend, waiting for the vacation, waiting for success, waiting for the next event to truly start living. When we wait, we imply that the present moment is not good enough, and that real life will begin at some point in the future. This resistance to the moment steals our joy and presence. This story is about Takeru, a successful man who always lived in time calculation and haste.
Takeru was a stock investor. His work required time, precision, and speed in decision-making. His success kept.
Dogen handed Takeru a beautiful hourglass, but it was inverted. The full sand was at the bottom, and the empty part was at the top. "Takeru," Dogen said, "you are used to seeing time as sand falling from top to bottom, from future to present, and you feel driven by the constant loss of sand. But I want you to look at this hourglass. The part that is past, sand at the bottom, is the past. The part that is falling is the present, and the part waiting at the top is the future. You are either looking at the fallen sand and regretting, or looking at the sand about to fall and rushing. Neither is life." Dogen gently flipped the hourglass. "Look here, Takeru. The flow of sand is impermanence unfolding. You cannot control it, cannot speed it up, nor slow it down. Your suffering comes from resisting this flow and trying to grasp every grain of sand, letting go of clinging to the future and past. Takeru's lesson is about letting go of non-temporal attachment and wasting life in waiting. Zen teaches that only the present is real, the past is memory, the future is illusion. Peace comes from being fully present in the flow of impermanence. Chapter 11. Let go of false haste. Recognize that busyness is not value, and slow, focused presence is the true skillful action. Kung Fu. Chapter 13. Embrace the pause. Learn to find completeness in the moments considered empty or wasted by the ego. Waiting for the bus, sitting still, watching the clouds pass. That is when awareness has a chance to rest and recognize itself. Chapter 9. Life is in the flow, like water. Chapter 5. Let life flow through you at its natural speed, without resistance, without forcing. Dogen concluded, "Takeru, you have lived your life as a race to a non-existent finish line. Letting go is not about using time better, but about stopping the clinging to time as a measure of value. Find completeness in the sand falling right now, not in the moment the hourglass will be full." Takeru returned to his life. He still worked. You read them and will be hereafter. It doesn't require improvement. It doesn't need to be fixed or achieved or perfected. It only needs to be recognized and allowed. We have spent our lives seeking peace in external places, money, fame, relationships, specific emotional states. But peace is not a place to go or an item to possess. Peace is the natural state of awareness when it stops clinging. Think of it this way. Awareness is the eternal blue sky, as mentioned in Chapter 10. Thoughts, emotions, experiences, successes, and failures are merely clouds passing by. The sky is not changed by the clouds. It is not polluted by the storm, nor improved by the sunshine. It simply is there, still and complete, in perfect perfection. The final letting go, resting in yourself. Now, when all the teachings have been presented, the final letting go is letting go of the effort to let go. If we cling to, "I must practice letting go," or "I must remember these lessons to find peace," we create a new chain. Like removing the second thorn, Chapter 2, we must also let go of the act of removing the thorn. This final message is a call to rest. Let go of trying to remember the lessons. They have been sown in your mind. Let them sprout on their own. Let go of working to understand. The deepest understanding comes when the mind rests. Let go of trying to maintain any state, whether it is stillness, joy, or even letting go. Imagine you are swimming in the ocean. You have fought the waves for too long. Letting go is stopping swimming, stopping trying, and allowing the water to lift you. The water is awareness. It has been there to support you all along.
When all the grasping, the forcing, and the demanding that life be different fall away, what remains is simpler, lighter, more true. Rest in that awareness. It has been here all along, watching your life unfold, unchanged by success or failure, gain or loss. The peace you have been seeking through all your efforts is simply this awareness, recognized and allowed to be what it is. Just recognized, just allowed, just here. Rest in that. The shadow at the temple gate and unconditional compassion. The
suffering is their own clinging. He created a wall of separation between his peace and the chaos of the world, turning letting go into a form of self-isolation and spiritual pride. The lesson from the winter cold. One cold winter day, a traveling Zen master named Ikai visited Saito's temple to ask for lodging. When Ikai arrived, Saito was meditating in his room, warm and still. Ikai did not enter the room. He sat meditating right outside the temple gate, where the cold wind and snow blew through. That night, Saito couldn't concentrate. He heard the wind howling and worried about Ikai's safety. Finally, Saito opened the door and saw Ikai trembling from the cold, but still sitting upright, serene. Saito said, his voice filled with annoyance, "Master, why are you acting so foolishly? You have let go of all clinging. Why don't you come into the warm room?" Ikai opened his eyes, not speaking of stillness or letting go. He simply said a simple sentence. "Saito, you cannot let go of the cold of others." Saito was confused. He had let go of his own cold, clinging to personal comfort, but he couldn't let go of his discomfort with Ikai's cold. Saito's peace was broken by his resistance to the suffering of another. Ikai explained, "Saito, your letting go is private letting go. You have cleaned your house, mind, but you have locked the door, afraid that the world's chaos will soil it. Compassion is the final release of the barrier between me and other. It is the realization that the suffering of others is fundamentally no different from the suffering you once experienced." Letting go of spiritual selfishness. Compassion, karuna, is the act of letting go of clinging to difference. It is the realization that we are all leaves on the same tree, and the pain of one leaf affects the whole tree. Let go of judgment. Saito must let go of the judgment that others' suffering is their fault. Compassion is the acceptance. They, too, are fighting the second arrow. Open the heart's gate. Stillness is not a goal to be protected, but a foundation for action. When Saito lets go of clinging to his perfect personal stillness, the door to compassion between himself and the world. When that barrier fell, his peace became deeper and more meaningful because it was enveloped in compassion. Conclusion. Letting go of the final traces. The redundancy of instructions. We have completed a long journey from stories of loss, control, lack, to compassion and the acceptance of impermanence. Each chapter was a key to unlocking a prison door we built ourselves. However, in Zen it is taught that every teaching, every story, every instruction is merely a finger pointing at the moon. The purpose of the finger is to direct your attention, not for you to cling to the finger itself. Now the final danger has emerged, clinging to the doctrine of letting go. Mental clinging, the pride that I am the one enlightened about letting go. Clinging to the formula, trying to remember and apply the 10 steps of Zen letting go. If you hold on to these teachings too tightly, they will become a new burden, replacing the old one. They will become the armor woven with spiritual purity. This is the moment of the supreme letting go of the boat after crossing the river. The doctrine of the ultimate mirror. Master Ikai left one final image, the mirror. Your liberated mind is not a book filled with philosophy, but a perfectly clean mirror. Before, when a cloud,
A thought, an emotion appeared, we tried to write an essay about it, analyze it, or judge it. Now, when a cloud appears, the mirror simply reflects it. The mirror does not retain the image of the cloud after it passes. The mirror does not say, I once had a magnificent cloud, or I hate that dark cloud. The mirror is still, empty, and whole in every moment. Letting go of all the teachings is the allowance for your mind to return to this state of pure mirror. No need for knowledge, only presence. The end of the search. The final words of the original text are a call for you to rest in awareness and let go of the search. The peace you've been seeking through all your efforts is simply this awareness recognized and allowed to be what it is. Not made better, not improved, not achieved, just recognized, just allowed, just here. Rest in